My own brother destroyed me with a false accusation, and my family believed him without question. The day my brother destroyed me, nobody asked for my side of the story. My own father's fist found my jaw before I could speak. As I tasted blood, Ryan's satisfied smirk told me everything. He'd finally won. The family I'd spent my life trying to belong to never wanted me at all. I was born with a curse I didn't understand until much later, being the second son. From my earliest memories, I existed as a shadow in our middle-class suburban home, present but never seen, heard but never listened to. My name is Michael Lawson, and this is the story of how I became invisible in my own family. My brother Ryan was 3 years older and might as well have been crafted from gold. He was average in every measurable way, average looks, average grades, average ambition, yet my parents treated his mediocrity like brilliance. When Ryan failed his math final sophomore year, Mom made his favorite dinner, and Dad said, "Don't sweat it, champ. You'll knock it out of the park next time." When I brought home straight A's that same semester, Mom glanced at my report card and muttered, "That's nice. Ryan got an A in English this term, too." No accomplishment of mine existed without Ryan's shadow looming over it. I learned quickly that invisibility hurts worse than punishment. Ryan barely graduated high school with a 2.3 GPA. My parents threw him a backyard barbecue with 50 guests and handed him keys to a used Camaro. "You've earned this," Dad said, beaming with pride that baffled me. A year later, I graduated as salutatorian. My reward? A card with 5 crisp $100 bills and an awkward pat on the shoulder. "Don't spend it all in one place," Dad joked, already turning away to take a call about Ryan's latest crisis at college. That night, watching my family celebrate Ryan's new job stocking shelves, after he predictably dropped out of college, I stood in the corner of our living room with a plastic cup of soda, a ghost at my own graduation party. Mom had invited her book club friends who barely knew my name. No one asked about my scholarship or my plans. I realized then that I wasn't just less loved. I barely registered as family at all. When I announced I'd accepted admission to a university across the country, Mom looked up from her magazine and said, "Remember to call once in a while." Dad nodded without meeting my eyes. The morning I left, I dragged my suitcases to the front door alone. No one took the day off work to drive me to the airport. A year earlier, the entire family had taken a road trip to move Ryan into his dorm, crying dramatic tears at the farewell. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, I made a promise to myself. I would build my own life, expect nothing from these people who shared my blood but not their hearts, and never again measure my worth through their indifferent eyes. I finished my bachelor's degree in 3 years, pushed through my MBA in 2 more, and landed a job at a consulting firm in Boston. Meanwhile, Ryan cycled through 3 more failed attempts at college and 5 different jobs. After his latest venture selling insurance collapsed, my parents opened a car detailing business for him to manage. They remortgaged their house to finance it. During rare holiday visits, conversation revolved around Ryan's business struggles and my parents' sacrifices to keep him afloat. No one asked about my promotion or my new apartment. When I mentioned buying my first condo, Mom interrupted to ask if I'd heard about Ryan's new girlfriend. I thought I'd reached the bottom of their indifference. I was wrong. The real tragedy was just beginning. College became my sanctuary. 3,000 miles from home, I could finally breathe without the weight of comparison crushing my chest. During my sophomore year, I met Jenny in an economics class. She was from my hometown, though we'd never crossed paths before. Her family lived on the other side of town, and she'd attended the rival high school. Jenny had warm hazel eyes that crinkled when she laughed and a no-nonsense attitude that drew me in immediately. When I stumbled through asking her out for coffee, she said, "I was wondering when you'd get around to it." For the first time in my life, someone chose me first. Jenny listened when I spoke, remembered my preferences, celebrated my victories. The simple act of being seen, truly seen, was intoxicating. We spent 3 years building a world together on campus, a bubble of happiness I never wanted to leave. After graduation in 2005, Jenny was offered a promising position at an advertising agency back in our hometown. Despite my reservations about returning to the place that held so many painful memories, I couldn't bear the thought of long distance. We found a modest 2-bedroom house to rent, Just 15 minutes from both our families, but far enough from mine to maintain my sanity. Jenny thrived at her new job while I established myself at a local financial firm. We settled into domestic bliss, weekend hikes, impromptu dinner parties with her friends, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and crosswords. I limited family visits to major holidays, brief appearances where I could smile through gritted teeth for a few hours before escaping. Everything changed during Thanksgiving 2006. Jenny insisted we attend dinner at my parents' house, arguing it was time to build bridges. The moment we walked through the door, I noticed a shift. My mother, who typically greeted me with distracted half-hugs, embraced me warmly. My father actually made eye contact when he spoke to me. It wasn't until dessert that I understood. It wasn't about me at all. It was Jenny. Ryan couldn't keep his eyes off her throughout dinner. He laughed too loudly at her jokes, leaned too close when she spoke, found excuses to touch her arm or shoulder. I dismissed it as Ryan being Ryan, always wanting what wasn't his. Within a week, Ryan was showing up at our doorstep unannounced. Previously, months would pass without a word from him, but suddenly he needed to borrow tools, wanted advice about investments, or just happened to be in the neighborhood. His visits stretched from minutes to hours, often lingering until Jenny and I were clearly preparing for bed. "Don't you think Ryan's been around a lot lately?" Jenny asked one night as we got ready for sleep. "He's probably just bored," I replied, though unease had begun to creep into my stomach. Then came the afternoon I worked late. Jenny was home alone when Ryan stopped by, claiming he needed to use our printer because his was broken. When I arrived home, Jenny was washing dishes with mechanical precision, her movement stiff, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Everything okay?" I asked, sliding my arms around her waist. She hesitated before answering. "Ryan was overly friendly today, standing too close, making comments about how lucky you are." She turned to face me. It made me uncomfortable. Something cold and familiar settled in my chest. That childhood feeling of watching Ryan take what mattered to me. The next day, I called Ryan directly. "You need to back off," I said bluntly. "Jenny's noticed you're coming around too much and it's making her uncomfortable." "Whoa, bro, you're overreacting," he laughed. "I'm just being friendly, but sure, message received." I thought that would be the end of it. Instead, my phone exploded with angry calls from my parents. "How dare you accuse your brother of something so disgusting?" my mother screamed. "Ryan is just trying to welcome Jenny into the family, and you're turning it into something perverted." My father was equally furious. "Ryan only wants to be close to his brother, and this is how you repay him? After all we've done for you?" The irony nearly made me laugh. "All you've done for me," I repeated, but they weren't listening. They never had. True to his word, Ryan's daily visits stopped. But whenever we ran into each other at family functions, he'd flash a strange, knowing smile that made my skin crawl. His eyes would follow Jenny across the room with calculated patience, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I sensed a storm brewing, but couldn't see its shape. All I knew was that Ryan wasn't finished. He was just changing tactics. And when he finally made his move, it would tear my world apart. 9 months passed in relative peace. Ryan kept his distance, and gradually, Jenny's tension around the subject of my brother subsided. We fell back into our comfortable rhythm. Weekend trips to the coast, planning for our future together, even discussing children. Yet beneath this tranquility, an undercurrent of unease still tugged at me. Whenever we encountered Ryan at family gatherings, his demeanor had changed. Gone was the obvious leering, replaced by something more subtle and unsettling. He'd watch me with a self-satisfied smirk, as if privy to a joke at my expense. It wasn't hatred in his eyes, but a cold anticipation that made my skin crawl. "Does Ryan seem different to you?" Jenny asked after Easter dinner in 2015. "Not better, just like he's waiting for something." I squeezed her hand. "I've noticed it too. Maybe he's finally growing up." But neither of us believed that. We just couldn't imagine what he might be planning. June slipped into July. My career was advancing, Jenny had received a promotion, and we'd begun house hunting. Life felt stable for the first time since returning to our hometown. I should have known better. I'd experienced enough of Ryan's patterns to recognize the calm before his storms. On July 23rd, my phone rang during lunch. Dad's name flashed on the screen. Strange, I thought. He never called during work hours. Hello? Get to the house. Now. His voice was steel, colder than I'd ever heard it. Worthless piece of shit like you doesn't deserve to be part of this family anymore. The line went dead. My stomach dropped to my feet. I called Jenny immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. With shaking hands, I drove to my parents' house, my mind racing through possibilities, each worse than the last. I parked behind a row of familiar cars. My aunt's SUV, my cousin's pickup, even my old high school friend Derek's sedan. What the hell was happening? The moment I pushed open the front door, the weight of collective hatred hit me like a physical force. The living room was packed. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, all staring at me with disgust. My mother sat rigid on the sofa, her face a mask of revulsion. Dad stood by the fireplace, fists clenched at his sides. Jenny was huddled in the corner armchair, face buried in her hands, shoulders heaving with silent sobs. When she looked up, her eyes were swollen and distant, as if she was seeing a stranger. And there, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, was Ryan. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes gleamed with triumph. What's going on? My voice sounded hollow in the silence. A woman stepped forward from the cluster of people. Amanda Cole, a friend from high school I hadn't seen in years. Her face was blotchy from crying, eyes red-rimmed and accusing. "Tell them what you did to me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Tell them how you attacked me at Derek's party 2 weeks ago, how you threatened me if I ever told anyone." My mind reeled. "What? I wasn't even at—" "We have proof," my father cut in, his voice trembling with rage. He thrust his phone at me. On the screen were text messages, supposedly from my number, full of graphic threats and admissions. "If you tell anyone what happened, I'll make sure you regret it. You know you wanted it. No one will believe you anyway." "This isn't me," I stammered, scanning the messages in horror. "I didn't write these. I wasn't even at that party. I was with Jenny that night at her sister's baby shower." I turned to Jenny desperately. "Tell them." "We were together that whole weekend." Jenny looked up, tears streaming down her face. "The shower was the night before," she whispered. "You said you were working late that Saturday." "I was. At the office. There are security logs. Cameras. Stop lying." My father's roar cut through my protests. His fist connected with my jaw before I could react, sending me sprawling onto the hardwood floor. "You're a disgrace, a predator. I don't want to see your face in this house ever again." Blood filled my mouth as I struggled to my knees. "This is insane. I didn't do this. Someone's setting me up." My eyes found Ryan, whose expression remained impassive save for the smallest twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Jenny," I pleaded, reaching toward her. "You know me. You know I couldn't do this." She stood slowly, hugging herself tightly. "I thought I knew you," she whispered. "But those messages came from your phone. Amanda has no reason to lie." She pulled her engagement ring from her finger and placed it on the coffee table. "We're done, Michael." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with notifications. Ryan had forwarded the fabricated evidence to our extended family group chat, ensuring maximum damage in a minimum time. I was pushed out onto the porch, my father's final words ringing in my ears. "You're dead to us." Within a week, I lost everything. My firm fired me immediately. Moral turpitude clause in my contract. Friends blocked my calls. A formal disownment letter arrived from my parents' lawyer. Jenny filed for divorce and a restraining order. I sat alone in a cheap motel room, watching my life disintegrate through a series of text notifications. Finally, one last message appeared on my screen. From Ryan, using his own number this time. "Always wanted to be the only son. Now I am." He had orchestrated my complete destruction, and he'd succeeded. But Ryan didn't understand one crucial thing. When you've lost everything, you have nothing left to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous creature alive. The next 6 months passed in a blur of cheap motels and cheaper whiskey. I drifted between temporary jobs, dishwasher, night security, warehouse loader, anything that required minimal background checks and asked no questions. Each paycheck disappeared into rent and alcohol. a cycle of survival without purpose. Sleep became my enemy. Each night brought the same parade of ghosts. Jenny's tear-streaked face, my father's contorted rage, Amanda's trembling accusations, and always Ryan's satisfied smirk lingering in the background. I'd wake gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, reaching for the bottle by my bed. February 12th, 2016. The date is seared into my memory. It was snowing, roads slick with black ice. I'd been drinking since noon, numbing myself against the knowledge that it was Jenny's birthday. The semi-truck driver said he never saw my car drift into his lane until it was too late. I woke in the hospital 3 days later, my body a constellation of pain. 4 broken ribs, fractured collarbone, punctured lung, concussion. The nurse told me they'd called my emergency contact. Jenny had answered, listened silently, then hung up without a word. 5 weeks I lay in that hospital room, not a single visitor, no flowers, no cards. When they discharged me, I stood outside the hospital entrance with a plastic bag of belongings and prescription painkillers, more alone than I'd ever been. Just end it, whispered the voice in my head that had become my constant companion. I might have listened if fate hadn't intervened. March 2016, downtown Portland. I was huddled on a bench, debating between food or another bottle, when a voice cut through my misery. Michael? Is that you? I looked up through greasy, overgrown hair to see a face from another lifetime. James Chen, my college roommate, dressed in an impeccable suit, briefcase in hand. My God, what happened to you? He asked, genuine concern replacing his initial shock. I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. Long story. James didn't run. He sat beside me on that dirty bench in his $1,000 suit and listened as I unloaded the nightmare of the past year. No judgment, no disbelief, just attentive silence. When I finished, he handed me a business card. I run a consulting firm now, security systems mainly. Come by tomorrow, 9 a.m. Shower first. We'll talk. I almost didn't go. What was the point? But some tiny spark of self-preservation pushed me through his office door the next morning, freshly showered in clothes from Goodwill. I need someone I can trust, James said, bypassing small talk. Someone smart enough to learn quickly and desperate enough not to ask questions. That's you right now. He offered me a position and an apartment above his garage, a lifeline I grabbed with both hands. The work was demanding. Digital security protocols, system analysis, long hours behind computer screens. I immersed myself completely, grateful for problems I could actually solve. But it wasn't enough. The rage and helplessness still simmered beneath my skin. James noticed. You need an outlet, he said one evening. Come with me tomorrow. The gym was intimidating at first. I was rail-thin at 154 pounds, weak from years of neglect. But Derek, James's head of physical security, took me under his wing. Everyone starts somewhere, he said, correcting my form on a basic bench press. The question is, where do you want to end up? I wanted to be unbreakable, someone who could never be destroyed again. For 2 years, I rebuilt myself entirely. Weights before dawn, work until evening, protein shakes, and strict meal plans. My body transformed from 154 pounds of despair to 216 pounds of hardened muscle. I grew a beard, cut my hair differently, adopted Derek's last name on non-official paperwork. Small changes that accumulated into a new identity. The broken Michael who lost everything was gone. In his place stood a man who understood that trust was a luxury and strength the only real currency. Then came Kim. I met her in August 2019 at the coffee shop near our office, Korean-Italian, with quick wit and a smile that made me remember what it felt like to want more than mere survival. For months, I kept her at arm's length, afraid to let anyone close again. But Kim was persistent, patient in a way I didn't deserve. After our 5th date, she confronted me directly. You're hiding something, she said over dinner. I can't keep seeing someone who's half here, half somewhere else. That night in her apartment, I told her everything. The words poured out like poison from an old wound. My childhood, Ryan's jealousy, the false accusations, losing Jenny, my family, my entire identity. I waited for her disgust, her fear, her inevitable departure. Instead, she took my hands in hers and looked directly into my eyes. "I believe you," she said simply. 3 words. The first honest acceptance I'd received since my world collapsed. I broke down then, years of pent-up grief flowing out in ugly, wrenching sobs as she held me. For the first time in almost a decade, I glimpsed a future that wasn't defined solely by my past. Kim and I moved in together 3 months later. I was promoted to senior security consultant. Life acquired rhythm, purpose, even moments of joy. But beneath this new foundation, I could feel the tremors of unfinished business. The injustice of what Ryan had done remained, a debt unpaid. And fate, it seemed, wasn't finished with me yet. The past was about to catch up in ways I never expected. May 17th, 2023. I remember the date because it was exactly 1 week after I'd proposed to Kim. We were discussing wedding venues over breakfast when my phone rang, an unknown number with our hometown area code. My hand froze midway to answering. Few people from my past had this number, and fewer still had reason to call. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello?" A strangled sob crackled through the speaker. "Michael, it's me. It's Amanda." Every muscle in my body tensed. The architect of my destruction was speaking to me for the first time in 8 years. My thumb jabbed the end call button before conscious thought took over. The phone clattered to the table. "Who was that?" Kim asked, alarm spreading across her face as she watched the color drain from mine. "A ghost," I managed, my knuckles whitening around my coffee mug. Kim reached across the table, gentle fingers prying mine from the ceramic before I shattered it. "Tell me." The phone rang again. Kim glanced at me, then smoothly picked it up, activating the speaker. "Hello, Michael's phone," she said, voice steady. "This is Mark Wheeler, Amanda Cole's fiancé." A man's voice, firm but fatigued. "She needs to speak with Michael. It's important." Before I could object, another voice broke through. Amanda's, thick with tears. "Michael, I'm so sorry." I lied. It was all Ryan. 8 years of buried rage erupted inside me. My vision darkened at the edges. Kim's hand found mine under the table, anchoring me to the present. "Explain," I said, the words scraping through clenched teeth. Amanda's confession spilled out in disjointed pieces. In 2015, she and Ryan had been secretly involved. He'd manipulated her feelings, convincing her to participate in his scheme to destroy me. "He created a fake WhatsApp account," she sobbed, "used your profile picture, made it look like your number. He wrote all those horrible messages himself." Ryan had orchestrated everything. The timing of the accusation, the gathering of family members, even Derek's presence to confirm I'd been at his party. After I'd been cast out, Ryan quickly discarded Amanda, his useful pawn no longer necessary. "I've been living with this guilt for 8 years, she whispered. "Last month, I got drunk at our engagement party and told Mark everything. He said I had to make it right no matter what." The room seemed to tilt as 8 years of unjust exile crystallized into certain knowledge. I'd been right. I'd been innocent. And now I had confirmation. "She wants to meet you," Mark said, reclaiming the phone. "Face to face to apologize properly. Bring your lawyer if you want." I looked at Kim, her eyes reflecting my own tumultuous thoughts. "I'll be there," I said finally. "But I want everything documented." 3 days later, I sat across from Amanda in my attorney's downtown office. Recording equipment captured every angle of our meeting. She looked diminished somehow. Her once confident posture collapsed into itself, eyes permanently ringed with exhaustion. The woman who had once pointed her finger and destroyed my life could barely meet my gaze. "Start from the beginning," my lawyer instructed. "Leave nothing out?" Amanda described how Ryan had courted her, showering her with attention and gifts. How he'd gradually poisoned her against me with fabricated stories of my jealousy and instability. How he'd convinced her that I secretly resented her for rejecting me years ago, a rejection that had never actually happened. "He planned it for months," she said, voice hollow. "The fake texts, the timing, making sure your parents and Jenny were there. He wanted maximum damage." My lawyer slid a document across the table. A sworn affidavit detailing Amanda's false testimony and Ryan's orchestration of the entire scheme. "Sign this," he said, "and we can proceed with charges against Ryan for defamation, conspiracy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress." Amanda's hand trembled as she signed, but her signature was clear. With that pen stroke, she handed me the key to reclaiming my stolen life. But legal vindication wasn't my primary concern. Not yet. First, there were people who needed to hear the truth directly, people who had abandoned me without a second thought. "There's something else I need to do first," I told my lawyer, pocketing a copy of Amanda's confession. Ryan had destroyed me using the people I loved most. Now his own pawn would be the instrument of his downfall, and I would be there to watch him fall. 2 days after Amanda's confession, my phone lit up with a number I'd deleted but never forgotten. Jenny. 8 years of silence broken by a ringtone. I answered but said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. "Michael." Her voice cracked, heavy with tears. "I was wrong. I've been wrong for 8 years." The anger I'd carried for so long surged through me, a living thing clawing at my chest. 8 years too late for simple apologies. "I need to see you," she pleaded. "Tomorrow, noon. Carol's Cafe," I replied flatly, then hung up. When I arrived, Kim was at my side, my choice, my strength. Jenny sat alone at a corner table, looking smaller than I remembered, the confident woman I'd loved diminished by time and guilt. Her eyes widened at the sight of Kim, understanding dawning in her expression. "Thank you for coming," she began, hands trembling around her coffee cup. She told me everything in broken sentences, each revelation more staggering than the last. After our divorce, Ryan had positioned himself as her shoulder to cry on. Within a year, they were married, a betrayal that should have shocked me but somehow didn't. "He wasn't who I thought," she whispered. "The business your parents opened for him failed within 2 years. He wouldn't work, just lived off your parents. He barely acknowledged our daughter." Our daughter. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Her name is Alice," Jenny said, sliding a photo across the table. "She's 7. I stared at the little girl with my eyes looking back at me. My child. A child I'd never known existed. "When Amanda came forward, your parents finally saw the truth. They kicked Ryan out immediately, after everything they did for him." She trailed off, perhaps realizing how the words sounded to me. "What do you want, Jenny?" I asked, voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Forgiveness," she whispered. "A chance to make this right." I looked at her with eyes that had seen too much to hold any warmth for her. "3 conditions," I said. "First, you tell everyone the truth. Everyone. No exceptions." She nodded quickly. "Second, I want to know my daughter, but you and I, we're done." Another nod, tears streaming freely now. "Third, I'll see my parents when I'm ready, not before. And they're not my family anymore. Just people I used to know." Jenny collapsed inward, shoulders heaving with silent sobs. Kim squeezed my hand under the table, a quiet affirmation that I was doing the right thing. Within a month, Ryan was served with legal papers. My attorney warned me it would be a difficult case, but we had Amanda's testimony, the fake WhatsApp account linked to Ryan's devices, and now Jenny's corroboration. Ryan panicked, begging my parents for money for a lawyer. They refused. The golden child had fallen, and no one was there to catch him. While Ryan's life imploded, mine expanded. Kim and I welcomed our son, Nathan, on a crisp October morning. I met Alice for the first time at a park, this cautious little person with my chin and Jenny's nose. She called me Michael at first, but Dad slipped out during our 3rd meeting and the name stuck. 6 months later, we gathered on our back deck, Kim, Nathan, Alice, who visited weekends, and Sarah, Alice's half-sister who had nowhere to go after Jenny and Ryan's messy divorce, an unconventional family pieced together from the wreckage of what came before. As I held Nathan, watching the girls chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, Kim leaned against my shoulder. "Do you have any regrets?" she asked softly. I looked toward the horizon, where the sun painted the sky in fierce oranges and reds, like fire giving way to a gentler night. "No," I replied, a slight smile forming. "I took back everything that matters." The past could not be undone, but it no longer defined me. I had something Ryan never would, a life built on truth, not deception. And that, more than any revenge, was the greatest victory of all.